here I am with a girlfriend that's a model. I just won a bodybuilding show and I had the trophies. I was in the best shape of my life. I was making anywhere from $60 to $120 an hour, depending on where I was working and what I was doing. Sports car, new apartment. What I really started to understand, Linda, was I put so much emphasis into the external world and the significance that it gave me, thinking that it would fix the internal voids that I was afraid to face and or unconscious of. I didn't really know that I was lacking confidence. I was just the way that I was. So after all of those wonderful things that I had, my girlfriend ended up leaving me, and I gave her every reason in the world why she shouldn't do it. The truth of the matter was I was afraid of being left behind. And go figure, that is what ended up happening anyway, as it should have. She made the right choice. But when that happened, that's when I really started to ask myself different questions.
Welcome to Linda's Corner, where we bring more hope, healing, and happiness to the world. Today, we're going to be talking about taking life to the next level. I'm delighted to welcome Kevin Palmieri. Kevin is the CFO, founder, and co-host of Next Level University. You can reach Kevin at his website, nextleveluniverse.com, and I'll include a link in the show notes. Welcome, Kevin. I'm so glad that you could join me today.
Likewise, Linda, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate the wonderful introduction. I am excited to see where we end up today.
Yes. And that's one of the things that I love about these conversations and podcasts is we don't know exactly where it's going to go. And it gives us just this flexibility and freedom to go where it feels right. Now, I would love to start. Most people are seeking for happiness through some kind of a checklist. They just know that when they reach these goals, like, for example, when I get that 6-figure income, when I am driving this sweet sports car, when I just have this dream body, or when I have that perfect relationship, then I will be happy. And you reach not only one of those checklists, but all of them in your mid-20s. Yes. So obviously you were deliriously happy, right?
Believe it or not, no. Believe it or not, no. I was not very happy. And this is the challenging piece to all of this is, at the time, that seemed like the pinnacle of my life. So I was a man who had been raised without a father. I didn't know my dad. I didn't meet my dad until 27. And I was a man who hadn't gone to college. So I didn't seem like there was very high hopes for me. Not a lot of people expected me to be any form of successful. So here I am with a girlfriend that's a model. I just won a bodybuilding show and I had the trophies. I was in the best shape of my life. I was making anywhere from $60 to $120 an hour, depending on where I was working and what I was doing. Sports car, new apartment. What I really started to understand, Linda, was I put so much emphasis into the external world and the significance that it gave me, thinking that it would fix the internal voids that I was afraid to face and or unconscious of. I think a lot of the stuff I was dealing with internally, I just wasn't aware of. I wasn't able to put my finger on it. I didn't really know that I was lacking confidence. I was just the way that I was. I wasn't sure what that really meant. So after all of those wonderful things that I had, my girlfriend ended up leaving me because I was unintentionally holding her back. Now I'm this person who pours belief into people and I want everybody to chase their dreams and their goals. My girlfriend at the time wanted to move across the country from the East Coast to California and chase her dreams. And I gave her every reason in the world why she shouldn't do it. The truth of the matter was I was afraid of being left behind. And go figure, that is what ended up happening anyway, as it should have. She made the right choice. But when that happened, that's when I really started to ask myself different questions.
So I think that this is just so interesting that when we have these things, you talked about you weren't expected to be successful. You didn't have this silver spoon. You didn't have this perfect background where everything was handed to you. And obviously you were going to get all of these things. You must have hustled. You must have worked hard. You must have done a lot of work. And obviously, in order to win a bodybuilding contest, it also takes a lot of self-discipline. So to say you have all of these things, you've accomplished all of these things, and yet you didn't know you lacked self-confidence. Can we go there a little bit?
Yeah.
What did you think self-confidence was? And now, what would you define self-confidence as? How has that idea changed?
I think back then I connected confidence to arrogance. I thought being confident meant you were arrogant. I think that's the best answer I could give, because now I define it as understanding everything is figure outable. But this is the interesting thing. If you're somebody who isn't very confident and you're maybe self-conscious, you have lower self-worth, you look at someone, and that was me, you look at someone who is confident and they say, well, everything's figure outable. That kind of looks arrogant because the contrast is so large, where I don't think I can figure anything out, and I don't think I know anything, and I don't think I'm smart enough. How dare you think you are? That is really what I was feeling at that time. And I say this jokingly, but also seriously. I think 2016 version Kevin would look at 2023 version of Kevin and probably think he was arrogant, because I'm very confident now, and I'm very certain in some regards when it comes to certain categories and buckets. I would probably look at him and say, oh, it must be nice. Oh, he's faking it, or he's arrogant, or whatever it may be. So back then, I don't know if I understood what confidence really was. I was very insecure, so I probably villainized anybody who had it. Now I think it's understanding that everything is figure outable, and it's certainty. I am very certain that worst case scenario, this goes off the rails completely. Tomorrow, the sun's going to come up and it's going to be fine. It's not the end of the world. That level of certainty, I think, helps build confidence as well, or helps show confidence as well.
And I think it brings some inner peace as well.
Yes.
It's interesting when you talk about arrogance, now you would define your earlier self as arrogant. And yet the irony is that looking back from former Kevin, looking at now Kevin, you would think, oh, that guy's arrogant. So there's a different idea in the mind about what this is. What is my actual goal? What am I trying to achieve? So arrogance, I think, is thinking you're all that. And yet the crazy thing is that idea was almost a veneer. You said it's kind of fragile. It is, you have to guard it. You have to protect it. You have to maybe not let anybody know what's behind that veneer, because then they might think that you're not all that, and they're right.
Yeah.
And so that is a scary place to be, because it's like that fantastic veneer can be broken or cracked. And so that's kind of scary. Now, I love the definition of things are figure outable. I think that makes it almost sounds like humility to me, where it's not, I know everything. It's going to be okay. I can figure it out. It's going to work out. Things are going to be okay. And I know that I'm somebody who's going to weather the storm, whatever it may be, and I'm going to be okay. So that's so empowering, and it's not fragile, because it's not dependent on what happens next. It's not dependent on my success. It's not dependent on any of those external factors. It comes from within. Yeah. So that's really cool. That's really cool.
I appreciate it. Now more than ever, I think arrogance is confidence without competence. So and this is an example. And again, I love my grandmother. I don't mean anything negative by this. You can insert anyone. If you've ever watched a sporting event, baseballs particularly, and said, wow, I can't believe they didn't hit that, or I can't believe they didn't catch that, that's a little bit arrogant, because I'm sure it's probably very hard to be a professional athlete. I do that too. I watch a lot of fighting. I'm a big mixed martial arts fan. It's like, how did you get caught by that? Because they're professionals. That's how they got caught by that. I think that's just a kind of an offset of arrogance. It's not real arrogance, but you're a podcaster. How many people, asking, there's a little pain behind this question. How many people that aren't podcasters, don't listen to podcasts, and have never spoken publicly have tried to give you advice on what to do? Probably a good amount. I think that's an arrogant energy. You should do this because I say, versus it might benefit you to do this because I have experience that would prove that. That I think is arrogance now more than ever. But again, I was that guy who was fragile. I looked like I had it all. What I used to say is, in the gym, I was Superman. In real life, I was Clark Kent. In the gym, I was a 10 out of 10. I was always one of the most in shape people at whatever gym I went to. But in real life, I didn't feel that way. No way. No way. Now, podcasting, I'm probably a 9 out of 10, but it doesn't mean I am when I go to my next meeting or when I go out to dinner with my wife. I think a lot of it is circumstantial confidence as well.
Interesting. So, confidence without competence. And that is a form of arrogance. And yet, to go back to what confidence is, as I can figure it out. And if you're going to put yourself in that football game or put yourself in that whatever, it's like, if I were the guy, I totally would have caught that. I would have never fumbled that. I would have done this. I would have done that. I would have won that fight, whatever. When the reality is you haven't even tried. And that reminds me of the man in the arena, that idea of it is really easy to judge and to criticize when you haven't even taken any risks yourself. And so I think probably some of real confidence is that we're willing to take some risks, which means we're willing to fail.
Yes, 100%.
And so that's really interesting. Very cool. Okay. So Lau, I would love to talk a little bit about vulnerability.
Sure.
Because that's one of the things that you mentioned, we need that. So why do we need that?
At the end of the day, vulnerability is truth. And one of my favorite quotes ever, and it sounds very arrogant when I say that because I think it's my quote, but I'm sure somebody in time has said it. It's just words in a certain order. The quality of your relationships is directly connected to the level of vulnerability in them. Why? Because vulnerability is truth. The quality of this episode most likely will be connected to the level of vulnerability you and I share because it's truth. If you asked me my story and I wasn't willing to be vulnerable, I might have just said, yeah, I had it all. And then I ended up starting a podcast and now I'm successful too. Like that wouldn't be a good episode. There's no emotion. There's no feeling. There's no truth. I think vulnerability is one of the most important things in the world because yes, it's truth, but it starts with you. It's very hard to be vulnerable with someone else unless you've been vulnerable with yourself first. One of my biggest fears, insecurities, whatever, controllers for a long time, Linda, is my height. So I'm 5'4" on a good day. On a bad day, I might be 5'3.5". It depends. And for a long time, I was afraid to share that until I sat with it and said, why am I really afraid to share it? I know I don't like it, but why? Because my biggest fear is somebody turning me down because of my height. That's it, especially women. Now I'm married, so that doesn't matter. But that was my biggest fear. When I became vulnerable with myself first, it was easier for me to be vulnerable with other people. I used to have a porn addiction. It took me admitting, okay, I really dealt with that and I worked through it and that was terrible. Then I started talking about it on other podcasts because I've already been vulnerable. I'm at the truth with myself. Is somebody going to reach out and say, hey, you're blank because you had a porn addiction? No, that's not going to happen. And if it does, I'm already at the truth. I already know what the truth is. Yes, I know. I did. That's why I talked about it. So long story long, it allows you to get to the truth of what's real. And when you get to the truth of what's real, you can actually improve the truth. And I don't know if you can do that if you're living behind a facade of arrogance or behind a facade of delusion or behind a facade of ego. Our ego protects us, and that's great. It is very valuable and it serves its purpose. But when you're around the right people who you trust, you can lower that ego a little bit and say, hey, sometimes when you say this, it makes me feel this way. That's vulnerable. You can sense it even in the energy, but that's the truth. And if it's the right person, they're going to respond to the vulnerability with their truth and you'll get closer to the truth ultimately.
I think that's beautiful. When we can get to a place where we have nothing to fear and nothing to prove, then I think we are more whole. I've also heard it said that we can impress people with our strengths and we can impress people with our resume, but we influence people through sharing our weakness. And that I think is part of what vulnerability brings. So now that you've talked about vulnerability, I would like to hone it down. You said being honest and vulnerable with yourself. And if we can go back to your story a little bit, where you said there were some things that you hadn't dealt with and didn't even recognize that they were influencing how you felt and who you were. Let's go back through that story. How did you find them? And how did you choose to let them go?
I started asking myself why. That was a really big thing for me. I started asking myself, why do you feel comfortable around this person? Why do you feel intimidated around this person? Why do you feel good at this, but not good there? And then what I really started to do, Linda, is I started to fear chase. I used to have a flashcard where every time I faced a fear, I'd give myself a check mark. So in the very beginning, when I was an early podcaster, this would be a check mark. I went on a podcast today with an amazing host. They got a lot of episodes. Oh, wow, that was wild. That I started proving my fears wrong and trying to build confidence through proving myself right. That was a really, really big thing for me because I had very low self-worth and I had very low self-belief. So until I started working on those things, it's almost like I didn't have the confidence or self-worth to face the old things. And it got to the point, I would say, more coincidentally than anything. But when I was 27, I had a lot of growth start to happen. And it's because I saw my dad that year. That was the year that I saw my father for the first time that I can ever recall him being my father. And I got a Facebook message that said, "Hey, Kevin, I'm blank. I'm your father's girlfriend. He would love to meet up. He's seen what you're doing on Facebook. You seem like you're doing well. Is that something you might be open to?" No, I don't want to do that. That sounds terrible. I don't want to do that. I'm so scared. Threw my phone on the floor, said, "We're not going to deal with this today, Linda. We'll worry about this. That message is going to live forever." But then I picked it up and I messaged her back and I said, yeah, let's do it. So I drove to this diner and my dad wasn't there yet. I sit down at this diner and I had this very, very interesting, humbling moment where I said, I don't even know how I'll know when he gets here because I don't know what he looks like. So this is going to be very weird. This might be the weirdest thing I've ever done in my life. So he came in, and when I saw him walk by the window, I knew. I was like, that's him. I don't know how I know. Maybe the energy around it. I don't know. But that's my dad. So he came in and sat down, and it was as weird as you could expect. And I was very guarded and very closed off and not super vulnerable, going to our point on that. And he started crying and he was explaining stuff and, that we were going back and forth. But what happened that day was that I realized that I had given so much power over my past, present, future, so much influence, so much opportunity to a man who was not capable of handling it. At that point, I had done a lot of reflecting and a lot of work on myself, and he hasn't. And I felt like I was looking at my son, not the other way around. I was way more developed than him. And what I got from that was a lot of empathy. And I had a moment where I said, I can forgive this man. Not for him, but I can forgive this man for myself because look, I'm 27 and I am more developed than him. That he probably couldn't have even handled having a son. And honestly, maybe I'm better off that he wasn't around because who knows how I would have ended up if he was. He was into some things, drugs, alcohol, that type of stuff. It probably wouldn't have been great anyway. That allowed me to look back on my past and say, oh my goodness, was anything real? When I was in third grade, fourth grade, for some reason, the first day of school, you go around and you say, I'm Kevin and my mom is this and my dad does this for a living. And I remember I was like, my dad's in construction. I don't know. He seems like he's in construction. Sounds good. I have no idea. Looking back at those now from that frame, I can laugh about it because it's like, yeah, that's the best I had. That's what I went with. I think the present allowed me to go back and unlock a lot of the stuff from the past that I didn't know. I was so ego driven when it came to, I don't care that I don't have a dad. I don't care if he dies. I won't be at his funeral. I don't need him. I'm better off without him, to actually having the opportunity and necessity to meet this person. And then all of that facade stuff fell away. The truth is, I was very hurt when I was young that I didn't have a father. The truth is, I felt broken. The truth is, a lot of other families tried to give me secondhand dads because they thought I was in trouble without one. And all of that came to me as a realization when I saw him. So yeah, that is really what helped me a ton, uncondition all that other stuff, is I became very self-aware through asking myself the right questions over time. And then I faced the thing that I never thought I would have to, that scared me the most. And it unlocked so many things because I was able to see them with a new perspective.
That's amazing. And the timing is quite interesting that
Mm.
you were in a place where you had already been working on yourself for a couple of years, maybe,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
for a while.
Yeah.
And so by then, this new hard thing, you were able to handle it,
Mm.
even though it was terrifying. And so that opened a whole new door. I love the compassion that you were able to show, that you recognized him, that he was not able to give what he did not have.
Mm.
And you can see him as a fallible human rather than as just, gosh, why weren't you there? Why weren't you everything that I wanted? It's almost like in the forgiveness, it's I can forgive you for not being what I wanted you to be.
Mm.
And I think that's part of that release and that letting go. I just can imagine that would open a whole new can of worms of just, wow, how did this affect me? I've been pretending that it didn't for a very long time. And now I recognize and I'll admit to myself
Mm.
that affected me very deeply.
Yeah.
And so now I've got some things to unpack and some things to let go. So what are some of the techniques that you use, or how do you just choose and say, okay, I forgive, I let go? Or is there anything that helps you to be able to do that? Because I think it can be hard. I think forgiveness is often like an onion. It's in layers. It's like, I forgive you. And
Yeah.
now I'm mad at you again. So now I forgive the next level. And then something else comes up and I'm mad at you again. And I can forgive that next level until it becomes softer and easier and I can move forward.
Yeah, this isn't my quote. I believe it's a Tony Robbins quote. But if you're going to villainize someone for all the negatives they gave you, you have to give them the credit for all the positives they gave you. I wouldn't work as hard as I do if I didn't have that chip on my shoulder. I wouldn't be the husband I am if I didn't go through that, for certain. I wouldn't be as kind to people. The pain that created for me also created a drive that I just don't know if I could manufacture anywhere else, really. And it also I have a very high standard for my character. I don't think that would be there if I had a negative person around. So I don't know. I don't know if I am good at forgiving. I think that I'm really good at forgiving. I think now more than ever, I'm really good at empathizing because I have worked so hard to get to where I am that I don't expect anybody else to want to do it. I don't expect anybody to want to do the amount of work I've done on myself or be as broke as I've been or face the mirrors I've faced or the physical, mental, emotional, spiritual pain that I've endured. And I'm not comparing that to anybody else's. I'm just saying my journey has been very hard for me. I have empathy for the fact that the reason I'm doing it is because I have really big goals, not necessarily because I want to do it. I try to connect that to other people. Yeah, my dad didn't intentionally hurt me. Now, obviously, intention matters, but action matters as well. But he's just not very self-aware. He had no idea. He had no idea what he was doing. That I try not to take it as seriously because I know behind every action, somebody else is going through their own stuff that was an action created by somebody else. That it's just a generational thing of something happens to somebody when they're young and it hurts their self-worth and it hurts their self-concept. And unfortunately, if they don't uncondition that, they might pass that on to somebody else. That happened to me and I was able to uncondition it. So now I won't pass it on to anybody else. But what if it didn't happen to me and then somewhere in life I developed that and then I started passing it on to somebody else? I don't know. It's almost like the pain was the awareness of what not to do. And once I knew what not to do, it was like, all right, cool. I just don't be that and we'll be good. And then it was like, okay, be better at what you are and continue. So I don't know if I have a really good answer. I would just say it's the perspective that, yeah, there was a lot of negatives and there was a lot of pain and there was a lot of reasons not to forgive. But the work ethic I have and the clarity on my goals and my mission and how focused I am on my character, I do not believe I would have that without the adversity I had gone through. So if you are able to, your adversity can become your advantage, but you have to look at it as that and not this happened to me. It happened and I definitely dealt with it, but now it has created so much opportunity for me in the future.
That is brilliant. That is so awesome. And the way that you have handled it, the way that you have addressed it, you have become a better person because of the things that you have been through. And all of us face adversity. We all face challenges. We all have things that go wrong. And it can be just so frustrating and it can just feel so overwhelming at times. And many people succumb to a victim mentality, which is, I have no control. Stuff just happens to me. It just happens. If I'm in that spot, Kevin, let's say I had a crappy life and everything is just against me. And is there advice that you could give me to help me, I don't know, take some accountability and to find something good and to be able to move and take that next step? Because we're all talking about upping that level, going to the next level.
My analogy for that is always, it would seem insane for someone to take the time to paint a car that has 4 flat tires. I think a lot of us think we're walking around with 4 flat tires, so we'll never invest in ourselves and we'll invest in our futures. It would be that. It would be, if you do not believe you are able to improve, if you feel like you're beyond repair, if you think you're always bruised or marked by your past, you might never be willing to do the work necessary to put the next coat of paint on. And I think it's just a self-awareness thing of, unfortunately, and I've been blessed to talk to so many members of our community, but I've also heard so many terrible stories, terrible, unbelievable things that have happened to people, and it's terrible. But a lot of those people are also doing really awesome things in the world. And it's because they were able to say, okay, this happened to me, but it does not have to become me. This happened to me in the past. It doesn't have to look like my future. It would be that. It's very easy to look at what happened as a negative and say, this is always who I'm going to be. Unfortunately, if you think it's always who you're going to be, it most likely will be, because everything you're looking at out in the world, you're looking at through that lens. It's not as simple as just flipping it to a positive mindset, obviously, right? But I think it starts with investing in yourself. Yeah. Start reading something positive. Doesn't have to be a self-improvement book, doesn't have to be a self-improvement podcast. Something positive that starts to shift the paradigm from stuck victim to possibility and potential. And then here's the last thing I would say. Be the person that version of you needed. The version of you that feels like you were down and out and nobody cared. Be that person. Be the person that cared about that person.
Exactly. And that gives us a chance. A lot of times growing up, we're looking for a hero, someone who can save us, someone who can step up, because so many of us grew up feeling so alone. Like, I have no one that I can turn to who is going to listen, no one I can turn to who really cares. I'm in this all by myself. And that feeling of growing up is so lonely and it's so frustrating. And to recognize that we can be the person who steps in and listens, who steps in and saves, who steps in and cares, it almost rewrites history. I mean, the things that happened, but they don't have to have the same meaning that they did before. And that, I think, is huge, because we've talked about events. Things happen. Many people go through hard, horrible things. But some people are successful in removing the meaning from that, the meaning of, I am a failure, or nobody cares, or whatever that meaning might be. And then it's just an event. I went through hard things. I can do hard things. And that is actually empowering rather than that squashing that can be the result.
It's very empowering. It's very empowering. And I think another thing that happens too is your natural thought is, I'm stuck. So you don't ever get to the point where there's enough contrast to say, wow, I've come so far. It's this weird self-fulfilling prophecy almost, where it's like, I'm so weak, I could never get strong. I'm a gym guy, so I use gym analogies. And then you say, well, I'm just not going to go to the gym. And then eventually you start going to the gym. And then a year later, you're like, wow, I'm so much stronger than I used to be. That's awesome. Good for me. Because there's an opportunity to create contrast, perspective. The perspective isn't that different if you're living where you used to live internally. It just kind of looks the same. So I think that's another benefit of you just trying to grow as a human, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, health, wealth, love. Because then when you look back, you can say, wow, I'm proud of myself because I invested in myself and I've come so far. And it's almost like, and again, I know it's not this simple, but the further back you start, the more powerful the progress is. Going to what you said in the beginning, if my story was I was raised by millionaires and I went to private school and then I got a job and I crushed it, and then the next job I crushed it, it wouldn't be inspirational at all. I'd be like, yeah, good for you. It wasn't that hard. But that wasn't the case. So if anything, the contrast is even more powerful. Hopefully it can be the same for you with the right pivot and perspective on it.
And to give yourself credit for the good things that you've done.
Definitely.
Sometimes there's a book called The Gap and the Gain, where it talks about, okay, we have our starting point, we have where we want to be, whether it's perfection or whether it's this list of successes or whatever. And then there's where we are, which is someplace in the middle. So if we look from where we are to what our goal was, to what our objective, to we might think, man, I am such a failure. Look how I missed the mark. Look at all these things I haven't accomplished. Look at all these things I haven't done. And it can be extremely discouraging. But if we can stop and take, this is where I am. This is where I came from. Look at my gain.
Right.
Wow. I have done amazing things. And they were hard and I did them. And that means that I am capable of doing hard things and I can do the next thing. And I'm looking forward to the next. It's just a whole different perspective on where we're looking. And it can make the difference of feeling those feelings of failure, I'm not good enough, or success and confidence. And I've got this. And back to your definition of confidence. And everything is figure outable. I can do this. It's going to be okay. Because look what I've done. And I can do it again.
Powerful.
Love it.
Powerful.
Thank you. Thank you. Oh, Kevin, this has been delightful. Is there anything else you want to make sure that we cover before we close today?
No, usually I have a quote, the quote. What's the good one for today? I'd say your reality becomes the parts of your imagination that you hold onto and pour into the longest. Your reality is going to become what you're imagining. And unfortunately, a lot of us are imagining being stuck. And again, if you imagine that, you're going to take behaviors or you're going to behave in that way, and you're not going to see the opportunities that are there. But if you believe in something and you can hold on to it and pour into it, right? Intention, belief, focus, all of those things. You got to take action though. 5 years from today, your life can look a lot more like your dream life than you probably think. So yeah, that would be the quote I would end with, I would say.
I love that. And I also end with quotes, and I've got one here. So I'd like to share a quote by Rory Vaden. He said, creating the next level of results requires the next level of thinking. Today, I invite our listeners to upgrade your thinking so you can enjoy next level results. See you next time on Linda's Corner. Thanks for listening. Please share and subscribe to help us reach new listeners. And if you'd like to heal your life from the inside out, there is a free video series at hopeforhealingfoundation.org. Just click on the free stuff tab. I also invite you to grab a copy of one of my books, like Crushed, A Journey Through Depression, and You Got This, an action plan to calm fear, anxiety, worry, and stress. See you next time on Linda's Corner.